Today, our subject is yoga, which we're going to be exploring as a Hindu method, well, really a collection, a concatenation of methods, techniques, practices in the Hindu tradition for overcoming illusion. If when you look at this graphic, you can see two things, both a face, well, here are its eyes, and here's its nose, here's the top of its head, and also a tree, and then to the left of the tree, a woman. Here's her dress, here are her feet, moving away, bustling away, I guess, from right to left. If you can see both of those things, then you're well on your way to understanding what we mean by illusion today. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to take a short detour, as I did in the lecture you read in Paths of Return as well, and talk about this very important, very influential sacred text, the Bhagavad Gita, which I've referred to a couple of times now in the lectures. In today's reading, it was vis-a-vis what the Bhagavad Gita has to say about yoga, the different aspects of yoga and the different margas or ways or paths toward liberation. So just a few things to review from what you already read. The Bhagavad Gita is a very small cross-section, tiny part, of a huge epic story called the Mahabharata, 100,000 in some verses, stanzas of poetry. There are actually two major sacred texts, which are also epic poems in the Hindu tradition. The Mahabharata is one of them. The other one is the Ramayana. The Mahabharata is focused on the avatar Krishna, and the Ramayana on the avatar Rama. Two very, very important sacred texts for the Hindu people. Bhagavad Gita means literally the song of the Lord, and the Lord is Krishna, who, as I explained to you in Paths of Return, plays the role of a charioteer in the chariot of a great, great prince named Arjuna. And Krishna and Arjuna engage in a dialogue. Most of the Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between them. As they sit in the midst of a historic battlefield on the plain of Kurukshetra, Arjuna has renounced the battle, has said he's not going to fight. He refuses to fight. He knows he's going to kill people, of his friends and relatives on both sides of the battle. And he says, I'm not going to fight. And that initiates a dialogue between him and the incarnation of Vishnu, Krishna. The battlefield, according to Hindus, is actually a historical place where there was a battle about 3,000 years before Christ. But as I said, in Paths of Return, really the point here is not the historic warfare, the struggle between two historic clans, but rather it's all intended to serve as an emblem or metaphor or template for spiritual war, spiritual battles. As I say here on the overhead that you're looking at, the Islamic tradition will refer to the same thing when they speak of the greater jihad, the greater war that we must fight within ourselves, against our own lower nature. So that's really the issue going on in the Bhagavad Gita. I quote here as well on this slide from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, where he also expresses spiritual struggle in terms of warfare. Though we live in the world, we're not carrying on a worldly war, for the weapons of our warfare are not worldly, but have divine power, for the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every obstacle to the knowledge of God, making every thought a captive to Christ. Now that could be, without the word Christ in the phrase, a pretty good description of yoga today. Trying to take every thought captive, make every thought captive, control the otherwise unruly mind, get some control over consciousness. That's really what yoga, in a sense, is all about. And this would be a Christian parallel, I think, that you're seeing here in Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. I thought I would also mention here a later text, that we see coming in the Christian tradition in the 18th century, edited by a monk of Mount Athos, the holy mountain of Athos, named Nicodemus, called Unseen Warfare, where he talks about the spiritual struggle again in terms of battle or warfare. In any case, what I would like to do here, before we go into yoga in detail, is to give you a sense of what this text, the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, sounds like. Well, also what it looks like in the original. So I've given you here on this slide what the Sanskrit looks like. I've mentioned this language, ancient language of Sanskrit before. This is Sanskrit script. Under the Sanskrit, I've given you a transliteration. Do you know that term? A transliteration is the taking of words in a foreign language and then expressing them in the letters of one's own language. So here we have English letters where you can actually listen and sound out as the person I'm about to play a recording for you. As the person chants from the Gita, you can hear what he's saying by following along here. And then also, I've given you simply an English translation of what you're going to be hearing. Let's read through that quickly. Krishna is talking. He's talking to Prince Arjuna. My dear Arjuna, because you're never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most secret wisdom, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. This knowledge, continuing down here, is the king of education, the most secret of secrets. It's the purest knowledge. And because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, this knowledge is going to actually teach you, Arjuna, who you really are. It's going to help you wake up from the illusions of existence. It's the perfection of religion. It's everlasting, and it's joyfully performed. 2 more verses. Those who are not faithful on the path of devotional service cannot attain me. Now, devotional service corresponds to bhakti, to love of God, O conqueror of foes, but return to birth and death in this material world. Last stanza, by me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I'm not in them. All right, well, we could talk about at great length what all that means. But what I wanted to do again is to give you a sense of what this all sounds like. So I'm going to play a short recording of these verses being chanted in Sanskrit. And you can follow along again with the transliteration. I should say the first thing you'll hear is the chanter simply saying the name of the chapter and the verses in question. And then we'll begin actually with what you see on the screen. I'll alert you to that with my cursor.
अथ नवमोऽध्यायः श्रीभगवानुवाच इदं तु ते गुह्यतमम् प्रवक्ष्याम्यनसूयवे ज्ञानं विज्ञानसहितं यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभान् राजविद्या राजगुह्यम् पवित्रमिदमुत्तमम् प्रत्यक्षावगमं धर्म्यं सुसुखं कर्तुमव्ययम् अश्रद्धधानाः पुरुषाः धर्मस्यास्य परन्तप अप्राप्य मां निवर्तन्ते मृत्युसंसारवर्त्मनि मया ततमिदं सर्वं जगदौ व्यक्तमूर्तिना मत्स्थानि सर्वभूतानि न चाहं तेष्वस्थितः.
All right, well, that gives you a sense of the sound of the Hindu tradition. It's tricky in this sort of online course to give you all the senses. And of course, I can't give you tactile sense or sense of smell or something like that. But I do want to give you some visuals as well as some sound as well. So that's what this text sounds like in Sanskrit when chanted in this very meditative, very slow, very ruminative, very kind of devotional way. Very important text once again. Pick it up sometime. It's maybe 100 pages, 120 pages long, and it's very, very powerful, very, very interesting. In any case, let's go on to yoga. We have said in general terms, right, that the religions of the world, religions in the plural, go back to that again, are combinations, each of them, of doctrine or theory on the one hand and method or practice on the other. And that they're revealed, the doctrines and methods are revealed by the supreme reality itself, however we name it, however we conceive it. All of the religions would say that their teachings have come down from on high. They're not human generated. They're generated and given by God. And these combinations of doctrine and method are intended by all the religions to bring the whole human being, our minds, our wills, our emotions, and our bodies into deifying union with that reality, toward transformation. And before, a couple times before, I think I've alluded to the fact that doctrine corresponds, as you might say, to a map, whereas method corresponds to the travel supplies that you need in order to go to the places that the map, sets out for you. We could say, I suppose, that doctrines are provided by cartographers and the methods are afforded by guides. So God is at once a cartographer giving us maps of reality and a guide giving us the lead that we need, the advice that we need as to what we should take on our journey back to Him again. So all of the religions, putting it very abstractly right now, contain all of those facets. In Hinduism, as we know from talking about the 4 fours, method or practice is constituted by what we call the margas, the fourth of the 4 fours, margas or ways or paths. And of course, as we know, there are 4 of these. There's jnana, which is the way of knowledge, bhakti, the way of love or devotion, karma, the way of deeds and acts, and raja, which is the royal way of yoga and meditation. I get a little diagram here that I thought might be useful. So margas, paths, spiritual disciplines, there are the 4 of them. Together, as it were, taking them all at once, they are intended to lead a human being toward moksha, which is liberation, right? Freedom. The ultimate goal, the ultimate aim of the Hindu life is moksha, which is liberation from all the things of this world. Well, how are you liberated? You're liberated by passing through the screen or the veil or the obstacle of Maya. And once you're through, you will discover what? You'll discover that you are nothing other than Brahman, Tattvamasi. You are the ultimate reality. So that's how the paths or the spiritual disciplines are meant to function in concert with each other. A word or two about this word Maya, illusion. Be careful here. An illusion is not the same thing. Notice my asterisk and at the bottom then of this slide. An illusion is not the same thing as a hallucination. If I hallucinate, I say something like, oh, help, help, help. There's a bloodthirsty troll standing right here next to my desk who's about to consume me or eat me or destroy me somehow. Well, if you were here with me, you'd look around and you'd go, Dr. Cutzinger, I'm afraid there's nothing there. It's all in your mind. You're just hallucinating. An illusion is different. An illusion is seeing something that really is there, but not seeing it quite the way it really is. So, take a glass, fill it half full of water, stick a pencil down in the water, look at the glass and the pencil from the side, and it will appear as though the pencil is bent, right? Well, we call that an optical illusion. The pencil's not really bent, but the light rays are being refracted by the water and it appears to be bent. There really is a pencil, there really is a glass, there really is water, but it's not a bent pencil, it's a straight pencil. So we're seeing, in a sense, what is there, but we're seeing it askew. We're seeing it in a distorted way. Well, that's what's at stake here with this idea of Maya. Maya is the illusory screen, which in some way distorts what's actually there. We're not seeing things as they are. We're seeing things in a kind of projected way, in a false way. As I said in the lecture in Paths of Return, the Hindus would say each of us is doubly deluded, doubly under the spell of illusion. Outwardly, the world around us is not, in fact, the seemingly solid world of the senses. What's around us is Brahman. Reality is Brahman. Reality is the absolute supreme spiritual principle. There's nothing else, right? From the monist point of view. That's what monism means. The only thing that exists is God, is Brahman. Simultaneously, inwardly, we're deceived, we're deluded, we're under an illusion because we think that we're our body. We identify ourselves with our body, our emotions, our thought, and our choices. But that's actually all just superficial. That's just froth on the top. Down deep, who we really are, if we could actually see it, is Atman. This word in Sanskrit that means the self with a capital S. And of course, we've been taught, we know the Hindu idea, Atman is none other than Brahman, Tattvam Asi. The deep self is the absolute reality. So that's the illusion. That's what we need to cut through. And we will cut through once we're liberated and come into union with Brahman. And the way to do that, or the ways, plural, to do that, if you're Hindu, are by following these paths, these spiritual disciplines. There are Christian parallels, as I said in the lecture you read, to at least the first three. Jnana Marga, way of knowledge. Well, you could parallel that with this text that I quote from John, the Gospel of John, chapter 17. Jesus says, "This is eternal life, that they know thee, the Father, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom thou hast sent." Well, knowledge is precisely what Jnana Marga is all about. We need to know the truth. And as the scriptures say, the Christian scriptures say, the truth will set you free. It will liberate you. It will give you moksha. Bhakti Marga can be paralleled with this text from Mark. "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength." So there's Bhakti Marga in Christian form, love of God and devotion to God. And then as far as Karma Marga goes, here's a text that might remind you of what we've said about karma, Matthew 7. "Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven," Christ is talking, "but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven." So the doing, the action, the deeds, the good deeds, the righteous deeds are, of course, part and parcel of what Karma Yoga entails, what it's all about. It's a little more difficult, it's not impossible, a little more difficult to find a Christian or any other Western parallel for that matter to Raja Marga, the royal path, that is to say, yoga. I point out here with my asterisk that the word yoga in Sanskrit is actually cognate with, that is to say, related historically with, our English word yoke. And this is not the yolk of an egg. It's not the inside of an egg. It's the kind of yoke that you use when you connect an ox to a cart or a horse to a carriage. It's what you connect them with. It's what you bind them together with. And so yoke in that sense and yoga mean that which connects, binds together, reunites. Yoga is all about reuniting us with the absolute. Reuniting deluded beings with their true self. That's the idea behind this term yoga. The aims are at least three. I mentioned these in Paths of Return. The aim of the yogi is to become detached from the material world, not to be so tied up and bound up with it, not to be so committed to it, not to be so bent out of shape when things in the material world get in our way and obstruct our path through this life. Secondly, indifference toward pleasure and pain, getting to the point that we don't care about physical issues, physical suffering. Happy, sad, it doesn't make any difference. And then thirdly and finally, concentration, being able to harness all of our mental powers and to focus everything on the true self. That's certainly a goal of the yogin as well. I've got the little box down there just to remind me to tell you. I said in the lecture you read, I would tell you about a friend who'd been to India and his experience with a very, very qualified, very mature, very adept yogi he met there. Well, the friend was Houston Smith. I've mentioned him before. And he told me this remarkable story about meeting this yogi who couldn't speak English, and so he was obliged to speak to him through a translator. And the translator said, translating what the yogi had said, he says, you can, ask him if you'd like, he can go into a meditative trance for as long as you'd like him to. And would you like to see how this goes? And Houston said, sure. He was very interested in this. So he said, well, tell him I'd like him to, go into a state of concentration for 45 minutes. He just kind of threw out that word, 45 minutes. And so the translator told the yogi this, and the yogi settled himself. We're going to be seeing momentarily how he might have settled himself in a particular posture, closed his eyes, and was gone. Just seemed to be totally gone. And then the translator said, now, if you'd like to, you can do whatever you'd like and see whether you can disturb him. See whether his concentration is really as, complete or as pure as maybe he's making it seem. Try to disturb him. So Houston talked for a while and, said things and maybe shouted or something like that. Finally, he saw a couple of boards or sticks or something lying nearby, went over and grabbed them, took them over, and smack right in front of the yogi's face, he clapped these two boards together, just, bang, right in front of the guy's nose. Not a motion, not a movement, not so much as a flickering eyelid. And my friend, Houston Smith, continued talking to the translator for a while and was kind of trying to keep track of the time. And at about 44 minutes, Houston told me, the yogi's eyes popped open and he was back again. And so through the translator, Houston said he asked the yogi, well, did you not notice anything? Were you really so completely absorbed in the self that you didn't even know I was trying to disturb you? And the yogi, it was very interesting. Houston said he was very humble, the yogi, and said, well, as a matter of fact, there was this very, very slight moment where I thought I could hear way, 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 like way, way off in the distance, this slight little sound, this little kind of tick or something. And that was the slamming of the boards together or the sticks together right in front of his nose. So I'm just telling you this to give you some sense of the rather extraordinary, more than extraordinary, the awesome powers that the practice of yoga is apparently able to give to some people, to people that are accomplished and practiced in these particular methods. Well, what are the methods? I talked about them, of course, in the reading already. Just a quick review. They include at least 4 things. The use of particular postures called asanas, the control of the breath, which in turn is meant to lead to control of our, they would put it this way, our life force in general. Maybe even things like the beating of the heart or digestive processes can be controlled, the yogis say. The use of mantras, which are sacred words or sounds that one repeats and repeats and repeats to produce a kind of inward rhythm. And then meditation on death. I ask you here, or I suggest here for you, that you maybe Google online and look for Patanjali, the Yoga Sutras. This is a classic yogic text, including these various techniques that I'm talking about. And it's only a few pages long. I'm going to say 8 or 10 pages, something like that. Patanjali lays out his 8 steps to liberation, 8 different steps leading to moksha. And I put Buddhism in parentheses here as a kind of foreshadowing or a preview of coming attractions. We're going to see that in Buddhism, there's a similar understanding that there are particular steps or stages that you can follow incrementally, systematically, in a disciplined way, leading to ultimate, well, what the Buddhists call enlightenment, but basically the equivalent for our purposes here of moksha or liberation. So here are some asanas. This is the one that was described in the reading in Paths of Return. You put one foot on the opposite thigh and the other foot on that opposite thigh. You reach your arms round your back, and with opposite arms you take hold of your big toes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what it looks like. Yeah, I've said before, don't try this at home. Don't do this without supervision. Here's another one. You've seen this man before. This is a very, very famous yogi, B.K.S. Iyengar. And here's another very interesting asana or posture. Here's a woman with a particular asana. Again, not sort of an easy thing to get into. And then fourthly, again, BKS Iyengar, in a balancing act that just defies imagination. I've put on the course site a very short clip of Iyengar actually illustrating the next technique, which is pranayama. Pranayama has to do with breath control. And the clip that I gave you from YouTube, it's only 2 or 3 minutes long, I think, shows the kind of mastery that a very advanced yogi can have over his breath. It's just extraordinary again. Part of what pranayama entails is lengthening inhalation, puraka it's called, lengthening exhalation, rakaka, and then retaining, holding the breath in or holding the breath out for increasingly long periods of time. What's the point? Well, the point is, the assumption here is, the preconception behind all of this is that the breath, prana, and consciousness, citta, are intimately, organically related to each other. How we think, how our mind operates, and how our breath functions are, as it were, two sides of one coin. And by gaining increasing control of the breath and being able to lengthen the breath, inhale, exhale, slower and slower and slower and slower, you can reduce the amount of breath that you need in a minute or in an hour in significant ways, and in a way replicate or mirror the kind of consciousness that you have in the deepest of sleep, in dreamless sleep, when, as you know from the reading, the Hindus claim we actually all go back to our union with Brahman, but then we wake up and most of us forget where we've been. We forget about our union with God. We forget who we really are. The Bhagavad Gita, which we've talked about now, says, a passage from the Bhagavad Gita, ascetics who keep strict vows sacrifice by suspending the cycle of vital breath, the flow of inhaling and exhaling as they practice breath control. Now notice that word suspending. There are claims among yogis in the yogic tradition of Hinduism that you can actually slow the breath down to the point that it stops, and that it's possible for these people actually to live without oxygen for hours or maybe even days at a time as they go into the deepest possible state of trance or the deepest possible state of consciousness. I'm giving you a parallel text in a different tradition, anticipating again and kind of foreshadowing something later on when we talk about the Chinese religion of Taoism. In fact, I'll talk about yogic Taoism when we get to that point, because there are certain features in Taoism that will remind you of what we're talking about here right now. In the Tao Te Ching, classic text of Taoism, we're told, and I quote, all the myriad things in the universe are woven of both yin and yang. I showed you the yin and yang symbol the other day. We'll talk more about that later on. All the myriad things in the universe are woven of those two different qualities, deriving their vital harmony from the proper blending of the two vital breaths. Well, what are the two vital breaths? Inhalation, exhalation. Inhalation, exhalation. So that's what pranayama involves, control of breath and by extension life force, perhaps to the point even of being able to stop the breath. And some of them say even stop the heartbeat for a while. Really strange stuff, you will say, if you're coming from a Christian tradition, a Christian background, except that there actually are Christian parallels. In the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox Christian tradition, there are various spiritual teachers, saints and spiritual masters that have actually themselves used this kind of breath control in their own meditation. I'm quoting here from a 14th century Eastern Christian saint, Nicephorus the Solitary, from a discourse that you find in a very, very important collection of Christian spiritual writings called the Philokalia. And here's what he says. You know that our breathing is the inhaling and exhaling of air. The organs that serve for this are the lungs, which lie around the heart, so that air passing through them thereby envelops the heart. Breathing is thus a natural way to the heart. Having collected your mind within you, and of course that's harder than it sounds, lead it into the channel of breathing through which air reaches the heart. And together with this inhaled air, try to force your mind to descend into the heart and remain there. This practice, keeping the mind from dreams and distractions, that's perfect Christian equivalent for what yoga entails. Keeping the mind from dreams and distractions renders it, the mind, impenetrable to inner talking. The goal here is to achieve perfect silence, perfect inward stillness, what in Greek is called hesychia. And people who practice, Christians who practice this particular method, we call them hesychasts after their search for this silence. So this would be a Christian parallel, since we're comparing religions, with what we're talking about here with yoga and its use of the technique called pranayama. All right, and then come, third technique, the use of mantras. Mantras are either individual sounds or short words or phrases or even maybe a verse, a stanza of poetry, which a yogi may repeat rhythmically again and again and again and again and again, also to help him achieve inward stability, unity, overcoming distraction, providing a kind of center, grounding him in a certain way through this repetition process. And I give you here just some examples of mantras. A 4-line, rather comparatively lengthy mantra, which in translation says, "From ignorance lead me to truth, from darkness lead me to light, from death lead me to immortality. Peace, 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 shanti, shanti, shanti," is the Sanskrit. Another mantra is a formula which simply says, reminds the yogi, tries to help the yogi remember that who he really is. I am Brahman. Aham Brahma Asmi. I am Brahman. Or another one, translated into English, Lord Rama, victory to Rama, victory, victory to Rama. This is for someone who's a devotee of the avatara of Vishnu, Rama. Like the man in a book of saints, whose autobiography I'm having you read. This is Swami Ramdas that I'm speaking of. And you'll hear him constantly repeating, constantly using the word Ram, 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 Ram as a kind of mantra to center himself and to remind him of his relation with God. And of course, a big daddy mantra is this Om sound that I've mentioned before. Om is often pronounced in a very, very, very prolonged way, accompanying some of these long exhalations that I've described here already. And the vibration of the is also, they say, helpful in achieving some kind of inward silence, stability, unity, groundedness, etc., etc. So that's a mantra as well. The Om symbol, the Om sound is a mantra. All right, and then fourthly and finally, of these techniques that yogis use is meditation on death. What in Latin, in the Christian West, would be called memento mori, and what in the Orthodox Christian East in Greek would be called meliti tou thanatou. Both of those mean remembrance of death or rehearsal for death or meditation on death. Now the text that I put here in front of you is actually a Buddhist text, but it comes to the same point. All of these traditions in their different ways complement each other, as we're beginning to see, I hope. And this Buddhist recipe for how to meditate on death could easily be used by a yogi word for word. So take this as being a fine description of what a yogi would do as well. So what do you do according to this text? If you're a disciple, if you're practicing a particular spiritual method, here's what you should do. Contemplate your body from the sole of the foot upward, from the top of the hair downward, with the skin stretched over it, filled with manifold impurities. Contemplate the nails, the teeth, the skin, the flesh, the sinews, the bones, the marrow, the kidneys, the heart, your liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, stomach, bowels, and excrement, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, lymph, tears, saliva, nasal mucus, oils of the joints, and urine, just as if it were a sack, with openings at both ends and filled with various kinds of grain. Just so should you investigate your body. And further, just as if you were looking at a corpse thrown on a charnel ground, eaten by crows, hawks, or vultures, by dogs and jackals, or devoured by all kinds of worms, so you should regard your own body. This body of mine has this nature, you should say to yourself. It has this destiny. It cannot escape it. Well, it's pretty morbid, I know, but I hope you can see what the point is. The point is to remind the disciple, you and me, if we're going to be disciples of this particular path, that we're not our bodies. We shouldn't identify ourselves with our bodies. We shouldn't get so bent out of shape when our bodies aren't as comfortable as we'd like them to be. Our bodies are temporary, ladies and gentlemen. What do they say? There's nothing certain except death and taxes. We're all going to die. And we might as well kind of get used to that notion by realizing the impermanence, the impurity, the temporality, the vulnerability of this body we occupy. So that's part of what's going on with this meditation on death. It's a very difficult thing to contemplate one's own death. I'm probably older than most of you. My parents have died. Actually, when my father died, I asked the funeral director whether I could come over and help to prepare his body and put it in his coffin. And the funeral director was a little bit put off by this, actually surprised. I guess most people don't do this, but I wanted to take this very seriously. And I thought to myself, well, touching my father, cold corpse, putting that corpse into its coffin would help me internalize my own future, which of course is your future too. But it's still difficult. Even at that moment, I can remember saying to myself, my father was more like an object. It was very difficult to think, this is me. His father before him, they're all gone. He probably didn't think he would go when he was my age either. He didn't think about mortality, but let's try to think about this. Hard to internalize, but a very important part of yogic practice. Again, I thought I would show you a Christian equivalent. I mentioned the word hesychia and hesychast a moment ago. Hesychast, that's the word right there, from the Greek word hesychia, meaning silence or stillness. So here's an Orthodox Christian hesychast. He's a monk in the monastic ossuary. An ossuary is a place you keep bones, and Orthodox Christian monasteries keep the bones of the monks who have died. And they often arrange them, skulls with skulls and thigh bones with thigh bones and, metatarsals with metatarsals. Here we have a room full of skulls. And the monk is holding a skull. His head is bowed just a bit. His eyes maybe are closed, and maybe he's trying to internalize this, right? He's thinking about his own mortality. He maybe is thinking about the skull that he's holding as being a friend of his who passed away, and that he will also, pass on to eternity. So meditation on death, an aspect of yoga, is by no means, unique or confined to Hinduism. We see parallels in other traditions and parallels also in the Christian tradition. Well, I'll finish up with this slide. I think it kind of pulls together much that I've been saying today. We have a woman, right, sitting in a chair. I guess she's at her table getting herself dressed and made up for a fancy dinner party, maybe. Her hair's kind of made up or on top of her head, and she's looking into a mirror, but then you look at it a little bit differently, right? And you see that the mirror itself is a skull. So perhaps as she looks at herself and preens herself and gets ready to look really good, maybe she's actually herself, practicing yoga. Maybe she realizes she's not going to last. Maybe she knows, that she too should meditate on death.